Hello everyone. Yes, it's been a while since I've done a video with a background that isn't just void or whatever the background of the video was before. Now, this one is a bit of a life story, I guess. And it's also a couple of other things as well. So it's going to be a bit meandering, winding, and maybe a little bit crazy in parts. None of this is rehearsed. None of this is scripted. And the beard is looking particularly wild today. So yes, if that's a sign of anything, then yeah. So I am not the kind of person who generally starts a project and can just power through to the end. And that's why it's as surprising to me as anybody else that I ended up writing a 65,000. I'm calling it 65,000 because with the notes as well, and the removed chapters and the moved sort of areas, it's 65,000, but on paper at present where I stopped it was 63,000 because I moved a chapter or two. So I'm not the kind of person who would start a project like that, really. I have tried to write before, and I've tried to kind of make my own franchise inspired a little bit by Doctor Who. That was going to be called A Story of Black Stars and Potatoes, and it may still happen, but I just need to actually refine it thoroughly and make it so that it is more in keeping with what I want it to be. Now, this current series, I already wrote probably about 28,000, something like that, words in an initial draft, and that was intense. The story that I created was very different than the one that I ended up with, and that ended up getting scrapped probably about October last year. So yeah, that original version of the story, it hit a couple of walls and I just wasn't happy with it. So I started again in October, roughly October, and I am going to start again this October. I'm hoping to not make a yearly thing of this, but it's just, and this is something that I want to talk about in more detail. I didn't just want to do this as a general sort of as a topic. When I look at why I want to do this, why I want to write it all, because it's a huge commitment. It's a huge amount of time that it takes of your day, of your thought energy, your daily energy, everything like that. It is a big thing. And if you're not happy with the book that you're writing, which in the first version of it, I wasn't happy about it. In the second version, I was much more happy with it. The story I was telling was much more of a positive and enjoyable one. So the story that I initially was trying to tell was one about a very bored office worker who realizes that he is not in quite the world that he seems, and the world that he's in is one that is a little bit like ours, kind of has remnants of magic, does not have a huge abundance of magic. It's there if you wish to look for it, but in general it isn't really abundantly. He would find something, as much as I can give, he would find something that would change his perspective entirely and change the way that he sees the world. I didn't like that version. The second version of the story kind of was very similar, except he would end up going on a journey. This journey would lead him to finding out that, versus the first version of the story, where he was just kind of a person going on a whimsical adventure, he would find out that the world that he is living in is actually very different than the one he thought, and was in fact a remnant of something that was for all of the trying really hard not to give spoilers here. He would find out that his world was different. Basically, that's as much as I can say. And he would travel to this other world. He would do whatever he does in that other world. And I'd already written in my mind the pre treatments, I guess, or not treatments, sort of ideas for the novels that were going to come after, and a couple that were going to probably come before, because I think the world that I wrote was very interesting. But as time went on, I just found myself struggling with it. The world that he ends up in is extremely bleak. For so long, like so much of the book, and it's supposed to be as the adventure goes on, he is able to completely change the way that this world works, the dynamics of the world, how things interact with each other, and of course, magic starts to return. However, I started with the premise all at the beginning that the Earth is dead. I did a Douglas Adams. Now, this brings me on to a really quite difficult part and often not very well discussed part of writing and being a writer. You have to let your heroes die within you. Every single writer has this. There will be a person or a group of people or a collective of different inspirations that made you want to write. Certain book series that made you really into reading, and as a result, you think that the way that the things that you read are the things that you want to write. It's not necessarily true. And that's the first hurdle of being a writer, I think. Finding your voice is something that is talked about in the abstract. But I think for many people, understanding what your voice isn't is harder, like much harder. And you can only find out what you are as a writer, what you want to be, what you want to do as a writer, by figuring out exactly what you aren't as a writer. Now that might sound pretentious, but the sort of format is very simple. The advice, the bullshit, feel good advice that people give of just write, yeah, it turns out to be kind of true actually. Write something, write wrong, do it all wrong. Hate your work, but constructively hate your work. Understand that you are not creating something that is final. You're not creating something that is just going to be published and out into the world. That was the first mistake that I made all those years ago when I was writing the first, I wouldn't even say book. I was using WordPress and I think it was WordPress, and submitting chapters as I was writing them for critique. That, by the way, don't do that. That's a terrible way to actually write anything, by letting the world see your first draft, your most fragile version of that part of your book. Sending that out into the world is just a really shit thing to kind of do creatively, because you end up in a situation where you don't want to make anymore, especially if you claim that you are okay with criticism and actually you're not at all. You are quite kind of sensitive to criticism, especially at the earliest stages of writing. So I think if there was any advice in this, I would say that was a number one piece of advice. Do not just give your work to the world when it is in its most vulnerable state, where people will rip it to pieces and critique it. That was one of the harsher lessons. A second sort of bigger point really is that there is no right or wrong way of writing, no matter what people say. And everybody has their own process. Everybody has their own way of doing things in terms of how you write scenes, how you plan scenes and everything like that. And people say there is only one process, there is only one way, there is only one effective way to do anything. And that's just not true. There is a most effective, which is the way that you choose to do it and the way that gets you results. And by results, I literally just mean words on the page. You could hate those words. You could leave those words and not be interested in them. You could just abandon those words. It's the nature of all of this. This whole process sucks. And that is a number one thing to remember, that to the rest of the world, perhaps if you make a book that's really good and people really resonate with it and like the characters, but if the world likes them or doesn't like them, it doesn't really matter, because a character can be rewritten, a character can be improved upon. And I think there's too much emphasis put on time, how much time we have, how much time we're spending on a project. Everything is rush, rush, rush. The more it kind of stays like that, the more it kind of is a very big push to get this project done so you can get the next done. The more your passion's going to suffer, the more you're going to struggle, the more you're going to find it difficult, because I found it very difficult. I was doing childcare stuff, helping my partner, and finishing a master's while writing this draft of the book. And it shows, looking back, so many of the second draft, the one that I'm calling 65,000 words, so much of it is driven by, I need words on the page, I need to get to the next chapter, I need to move forward, I need to put this concept in. And I didn't realize how harmful to the story that becomes. It creates a kind of debt that I don't think I've heard many people talk about. People just talk about the result, and that debt is what I would call editorial debt. You're using a lot of shorthand kind of style. You're using a lot of this, then this, then this, then this. You're not letting scenes breathe. And I think that is the biggest reason why I want to kill this draft. And it's a big draft. It's going to serve as the partial bones of the next version of the story. So it's not wasted. It's not wasted effort. And that's not just me justifying it. Writing is destructive as well as constructive. You can't keep everything. Unless you're really lucky and you've got a really in tune brain, you really can't keep everything at all. And the more in the book that you try to keep, the more that I think things just decohere or become incoherent and start to separate out like layers, literally. And in the end, you're going to have to pay for that anyway, because editorial isn't free, their time isn't free. You're going to have to make decisions that you don't like making. If you're really fortunate to have a nice editor, they'll bring you in on the decisions and say, look, we're cutting out this entire section, or we're going to move this, or we're going to reword this, make it clearer to the audience. And you're going to realize, or at least I realized anyway, that all of those shorthand decisions, all of those I don't have enough time to write a chapter right now, so I'm writing the briefest version of a chapter I can. I think that you suffer for that in the end. And as time goes on, those mistakes, quote unquote, accumulate. And in the end, you don't like what you've written. And it is true what they say. Like, it's not about, I've heard it said before anyway, it's not about ability, really. It's about time. Having the time and the headspace to actually be able to write and create and do things that matter to you. If you were on some big publishing, big publisher has said, right, you've got X, Y, and Z days to write a book, get words on page and go. So we'll clear it up. I think you're going to end up really sick, and you're going to not write the story that you would want to write. I'm sorry that I can't talk more about the book itself. I know that's probably one of the main reasons why you've come here. I've talked about some of the plot points and some of the story elements, but I can't talk about too much because, for one, it's not getting written like that anymore. And the second point is some of the elements are going to be repurposed and reused in the current edit of the book. The overall story point is that ordinary person, ordinary man, goes through life just not really paying attention to his surroundings, paying attention to anything. He's kind of oblivious. And by the end of the book, he's a completely changed person, gained some abilities, shall we say. But the biggest point for me was I wanted to firmly make sure that the book, and this is still true, I wanted to firmly make sure that the book is anti-war. All the way through the 65,000 words, I firmly want to make sure it was showing war in the worst light and showing recovery from war more than it was showing actual scenes of war. And that also is what led to things being really freaking bleak, to control the swearing a bit. It led to everything being really, really bleak because I don't know if you have ever played Fallout, but Post-war environments are not usually very nice, and that's the same for magical environments too. They're not very nice. Hell on Earth is hell on Earth, and hell on a place that is much like Earth is still like that. The current version of the story that I'm writing, it's similar but different. Instead of the whole journey just being sort of him going through life, encountering all of these things that he's encountering, meeting people, I really want to make it a cosmology. And what I mean by that is I want to make it so that he, the main character, is not just, oblivious, oh my god, what's this, what's that, what's going on. I want to make it so that he is actually becoming a part of the world. By the end of the last book, the last version of the book, he was still very good, go back to his office job sort of thing. What I want to do is make it so that in this version, I'm taking my time. I'm emphasizing solely the parts of the book that I want to talk about, the cosmological elements of the book, parts of the book that are to do with more than anything else, the world that I'm building, the people that he is going to meet are obviously very important as well. But I want to make it so that he is no longer traveling to a place. I want to change the nature of the book so that he is, in a sense, in a way, realizing that the world is different and the Earth does not get destroyed. Because again, as a writer, one of the things that you have to, the first bosses, I guess you could say, you have to deal with is your own demons, for one, your doubts, and then these pseudo personalities you build in your mind of writers that you're inspired by, fiction, non-fiction, all of it. They all live within there, within your mind. These sort of miniature versions influence everything you're doing. Oh, I could add a Douglas Adamsy joke there. I could add think of another example. You can tell who's one of my biggest, the people who've haunted me the most. Terry Pratchett, for example. Whenever you're doing fantasy or even some sci-fi, it's always those big two who are, it's not their fault, but because they had such a huge influence over the culture, huge influence over the books, over people and this cultural zeitgeist, it becomes really hard to not write like them, and they live within your mind rent-free. And that, like I said, that is one of the biggest challenges when you are writing. Beat that part. A second one is to realize that other people will write like you. So don't have an ego about how you write. You do manage to find your own style. Brilliant. But you can also write like another person. You can write like the greats. Just realize that you take on aspects, take on the debt that they made. It might be confusing me talking about debt to all of this, but it does make sense when you are writing. You take on the debt of those writers when they were making those funny stories, those funny tales. Well, unless they make sense logically and cohesively, unless it makes sense for those aspects to be in the story, then there's no point in having them in there. And when it is pointless to have those parts, those humorous elements, those points of levity in a story, then you're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, you're trying to make a joke works that doesn't necessarily want to work. And that was another harsh lesson that I learned relatively recently. A couple of months ago, I wanted to write a Blade Runner-esque kind of story set in the north of England, which is where I'm from. They can tell from the accent, but I wanted to make it so that the story was all about a version of Earth, or a sort of iteration of Earth that was taken to its absolute logical extreme. The North's industrial revolution never ended. The ancestors, or I guess successors of the North, moved to another planet, literally hollowed it out, and turned it into a giant block of multi-story, multiplex kind of city flats. And it would follow a detective who went to the planet. And you can't have this idea, by the way. I'm still doing things with it, but it's a point that I'm trying to make. He would do investigation stuff. He would be affected by something not very nice, probably akin to PTSD. He is sort of not a normal human, shall we say. That was a premise. I had constant humor in it, and it did not suit the gritty attitude at all. It just didn't work. And I tried and tried and tried to make it. I wrote test chapters, all sorts. In the end, I completely flipped the script and turned it into a dark humor kind of. I've not done anything with it since. It's quite a dark, gritty world to live in. Having already got a project that I am really enjoying working on, I think it's good to have projects on the back burner, I think. And definitely I will revisit that project at some point. But yeah, I guess this is kind of everything I can talk about on the video, without giving away everything about the books. But there's lots and lots of things I could talk about in story design and things. It's fun. It's a fun hobby if you don't destroy yourself doing it, and if you realize that you cannot keep your creations to yourself forever. They have to see other people. And when these books interact, especially at the early stages, expect absolute carnage. Now, again, this is not a kind of how to write or what to write or anything like that. This is literally just, hey, look, I write. Yeah. If you're interested in any kinds of videos like that, let me know. I don't know if this was any good or not, but this was the video that I could make right now about the topic. Suppose I will close off with one last thing. Is it worth rewriting a book that you've put so much effort, energy, and time? And do I regret restarting? The first question I think you can only answer for yourself. If you think you've put too much time and effort into actually making the book. But for me, it was the right decision because you can only write one first book. I wanted it to be like actually good and not just the book that I thought other people might want to see, might gain praise for being this way or that. I don't regret the book though. I don't regret writing those 65,000 words because it proves that I can do it. And I found in the beginning it was really hard to write. Now I can write 2,000 words of probably quite reasonable quality in like maybe an hour, if that. But it's not about speed. It's about, whether you're happy with the words that you've put down. And for me, I'm getting more and more happy with what I'm writing. I just think there is too much pressure on writers, too much pressure on everybody to tell you the truth within this society, within this culture. All creatives, too much pressure. Like somebody needs to sit every single young creative, old creative, every creative down and tell them, you just have to do something. It doesn't have to be marketable. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be sexy. It just has to exist. It just has to be a product, man. Like, it doesn't have to be, your magnum opus. You just have to write something and then not delete it and be able to sit with it and look it in the eyes and not hate it. Way easier said than done. You just have to learn to tolerate yourself. The words that came from your head, put onto page, to learn to tolerate your creations, and not hate yourself for something that you might not like right now. You might like it tomorrow. Your audience might like it. Your editor might say, that's actually fine. I really like that. And what's the point? Stop trying to make everything marketable. Stop trying, because that was the biggest trap with this as well. With this second draft, trying to make it appeal to a mass audience that doesn't exist. There is no mass audience. There is no general audience. There is no mass appeal to anything within this world. It's all niche, and your niche will exist regardless of if you cater to them. They'll find you. You don't find them. Through working through it all. That's the impression that I'm getting to. Take the pressure off yourself and rewrite a book or write a book. Or realize that you really shouldn't be writing and then write anywhere, which is exactly what I did. That's a story for probably another day. But yeah, thank you for listening.